Groundwater is an essential resource for Californians, and it exists under our feet, and oftentimes we don't even know it's there. But when we do know it's there is when we experience prolonged dry conditions. California really relies on that water supply to be there when Mother Nature isn't providing the precipitation that we're used to. We have in California about 10 times the surface water reservoir storage right below our feet in groundwater basins.
So this is a big deal. It's been known about for decades that underground water has to be managed and regulated in some way. This is a problem that's been around. It's a real problem. With climate change, it's going to get to be a bigger problem, and we have to learn to manage wisely water and energy and land and our investments. That's why this is important. And just signing the bill today is only the beginning. This process that is set in motion by the law is going to take many, many years.
The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is a new law that was signed in 2014 by Governor Brown, and this law will ultimately change the way groundwater is used and managed in California. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act requires that you look at groundwater usage in a comprehensive way. So looking at how agriculture uses water, how communities use groundwater, how cities use groundwater, how water is needed to keep a healthy environment. Therefore, you can't develop plan that takes into account all of these needs if you don't have the right stakeholders in the room.
The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is implemented across local and state agencies, and the State Board works along with the Department of Water Resources, and we act as the backstop. Ultimately, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is about local control. It's about empowering locals to be able to manage their groundwater resources here into the future. But we understand that sometimes local conditions, technical abilities, whatever it may be an impediment, and ultimately the state is here to help ensure that the promise of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is lived up to.
The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is really unique for a state statute, where a lot of times regulatory programs impose from the state down prescribing what locals have to do. And this law kind of did it in reverse. It set up a structure for us to oversee implementation, but really the decisions and pathways were given to local agencies for a lot of good reasons. And we've seen that throughout the 100 or more basins we have. Each one is very unique in terms of their land use, demographics, even the culture and history there that is very important when they're starting to determine how we're going to manage with what groundwater we have in a sustainable way. And that really speaks to the values of the community. So local control is really paramount for success for the long haul, because this is where people live, work, reside. And so having those choices that reflect local desires is really critical. And it builds buy-in from locals because they're responsible, they have ownership, and really brings success to the entire program.
Before SGMA, we were making decisions really in a degree of a vacuum. And a lot of our water supply conversations really revolved around growth. And growth is important and necessary to have the quality of life that we all desire and enjoy here in California. But fundamentally, the requirement to manage our groundwater basins means that we understand so much more than we did 10 short years ago about the characteristics of our groundwater basins, the characteristics of those supplies, whether they're clean and whether they need remediation, how when we do get big storm events, what happens to those groundwater basins. Some of them rebound, and when we have had depletion, we can refill them and that groundwater basin essentially reconstitutes itself. Other groundwater basins, they cannot do that because of the kinds of soils that there are, and that groundwater basin can actually collapse and we lose that storage. None of that information was something that we understood in California in an organized way before we passed this law to manage our groundwater basins. That's what sets us on a course for the future to manage our surface water supplies conjunctively with our groundwater supplies for the purposes of supporting our communities, our economies, our human right to water, and the environment.
So some of the challenges that communities have faced have definitely been really severe drought impacts and also overpumping, leading to hundreds and thousands of wells going dry across the state. And we're also seeing really severe water quality contamination. So people not being able to trust the water that comes out of their tap and relying on bottled water. So I think what Sigma is really trying to get at is how can we think about human right to water, how can we think about environmental issues, and be very comprehensive in our approach to managing groundwater.
I can't say enough about what it means to a community to have confidence in their water. Don't sit back and wait for others to do things. Get out in front of these issues. No person out there should be drinking water that is not healthy. Should not happen. So we need to get out in front of this issue right now.
Another thing that water supplies is actually the water needed to run businesses. And those businesses not only provide that product for us, but they also supply jobs for us too. So making sure that we have a reliable, sustainable water source is really important to our economy and our health and our environment.
Ultimately, managing our groundwater is an incredibly complex endeavor. The premise of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is pretty simple. Manage your groundwater resources so that you're not overpumping them and creating undesirable results. But we know that the reality of the complexity of the resource beneath our feet, the amount of money, coordination, and time that it takes means that we need something that's long-term sustainable. And at the local level is where you have interested communities, agriculture, local leaders that can have the capacity and know their basin the best to be able to manage into the future. So local control is an important part of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act because it empowers locals to really understand their resource and protect it into the future.
You want to bring people to the table that know their issue, right? There's no one else out there better equipped to talk about challenges in rural communities, needs, priorities than the people that live there or the people that are tasked with making sure that these services are available to the community.
And it really means a lot for us to be able to see community members as decision makers as well in managing groundwater because it's their community.
It's hard to believe 10 years went by, a considerable amount of work went in, but really some of the bigger things that have happened is the data. The amount of data that we have now on groundwater levels and across the board is not even close to where we were in 2014 when Sigma was passed. And again, that is so critically important during droughts and other water management periods that it's really placing us in a much better position.
So we see climate change as a real challenge for our region and for California. And groundwater will be a key resource that we need to adapt to climate change. It's important that we rely on groundwater more during dry times and surface water more in wet times. One of our key adaptation measures under Sigma, and it's identified as a project in our groundwater sustainability plan, is the Sacramento Regional Groundwater Bank. This is a feature of our community which will allow us to bank up to 90,000 acre-feet of water within the aquifer and be able to draw upon it in dry times. It is a key to adapting to hotter, drier, and at times wetter events that we can experience in the future.
Whether or not you're a climate expert, we're all experiencing weather that just feels different. Our hots are getting hotter, our overnight lows are also getting warmer. And so even though California's precipitation is going to continue to be variable into the future in terms of total volume that comes in any one year, we know that it's going to come differently. It will come more as rain over time than as snow. And so that'll be moving through our system in a different way. When it's wet, one of the first things we need to be thinking about is how do we get that water underground and how do we do that in a way that enables us to rely on that groundwater basin for clean and plentiful water when dry conditions return. And so to me, marking the 10-year anniversary is so important because we have set ourselves up in a 10-year time frame to solve a problem that had been decades and decades and decades in the making. And some of us intuitively think, 2040 feels like a long time away, but it's 2024. We have 16 years to bring these groundwater basins into balance. That's the goal. The goal is by 2040, even amidst all this transition in communities that are really impacted by chronic deficits in groundwater, when we get to sustainability, those communities are so much better off than they are today, and we have to keep driving towards that solution.
And we are definitely on track to achieve groundwater sustainability, and I have absolutely no doubts we're going to get there. The road's going to be at times rocky, and we're going to have to really work together as we go through this next period of implementation, but I'm really confident and hopeful for the future that we are going to achieve groundwater sustainability.
Sustainability is a big word. It has different meanings for different folks, but ultimately it's about being able to have our resources here into the future so future generations can rely on them just as we all have here in our ability to thrive.